Hello, everyone, and very welcome to another episode on our Open to Happiness podcast. I am your host, Nicoletta, and today I am very happy to have as a guest Brooke Siem, an author and award-winning chef from Reno, Nevada, USA. We will be talking about the relationship between war and happiness today, and I'm very excited to actually dive into this topic. Hello, Brooke, and very welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So we don't have a script. We don't know what we're going to talk about today. We just chose we're going to talk about war and happiness. I think it's quite an important topic, especially these days, considering what's happening in Ukraine, in Russia, in Europe. How do you see this concept of war from the United States? What's the vibe out there?
Of the Ukrainian-Russian conflict at the moment. It's very odd, I find. I mean, I am not personally connected to anyone, involved over there. I don't have family, and myself, I've never been in a war zone, so it's very discombobulating. I mean, I think that as humans, we're all connected enough to, especially now with literal connections with social media and 24/7 news, that we don't really have the luxury of not experiencing on some level what's going on the other side of the world. So especially, I think all of us, maybe our nervous systems are a little screwed up after the pandemic too. So there's just this level of exhaustion. And so it's really strange to keep going about your daily life and, do all the things that you have to be doing and you want to be doing, while still aware of other things going on the other side of the world. And I think there's a little bit of guilt and sometimes there. And for me, when we talk about the idea of the war on happiness, it's not necessarily literal war. I certainly can't ever compare my situation and, my struggles day to day with what the people of both Russia and Ukraine are experiencing right now. So, I certainly hope that nothing I'm saying comes off like I'm trying to compare the circumstances, but I do think that there is, on some level, just being alive, and not in a war-torn country currently, there's still almost this, it seems like there's this fight from the outside to stop you from finding happiness at all costs. Like,
yeah, we
don't turn on the news for good news, and yet it's where most people spend a lot of their time. I mean, I actively try and stay away from it, but I think it really goes along with like happiness and guilt, where if you're the one happy person in a group of 20 people who are suffering, you start to wonder if you're the crazy one.
Yeah. Very, very true. Because whatever happens there, it affects all of us. And I'm not talking about the economical impact and whatever from the social perspective, different social actors will mention, but it's about us as humans seeing that atrocity happening overnight. So I think it comes back to our safety in the world and this level of uncertainty that we can all experience now and again, probably now more than ever. Are we really safe in the world? Do you feel safe in America right now, providing what's going on in there?
I mean, safety is just, it's a very personal word, right? And it's also a word that I don't really like too much because it's really gotten hijacked, I mean, we're still busy talking about safe spaces for kids in college and, using, it's really gotten kind of hijacked, kind of mean, at least in my experience and in my world, it's gotten hijacked to mean anytime you feel uncomfortable means you're unsafe. And those two things are not the same thing. So from a true existential place, I think I do feel pretty safe. I mean, I have enough of a spiritual grounding to know that I'm supported on some level. And, you know, I don't think I don't fear my own mortality. Really, I certainly don't want to be in pain, but I'm not, you know, attached to the idea of being on this earth in this physical body, really. So, you know, on that level, you know, sure, I do feel safe, but kind of really on a more human level, then it gets tricky, you know, when the things like finances are impacted, and, you know, all the small things that make up our day-to-day stresses, that feels unsettling. I think unsettled is a better word for me than unsafe. And, you know, I'm just one person in a very large country who's not being directly affected by this, so I can't really speak for anybody else. But from my perspective, it's unsettling, and I'm just really tired.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's a feeling that we all share these days, providing what's going on in the world. So there is a world out there in the world. There is a war out there in the world. There is a war right here in our little space, in our little bubble. And there is another war inside of us, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is conflict. Conflict is part of our human life, human nature. What do you think of this?
I feel like it's just, you know, we get so many messages telling us to be yourself and to follow your heart, but it feels to me that that's gotten a lot harder to do over the past couple of years. That you know, that there have been so many restrictions put on us in almost every sense of the word. I mean, we've had literal ones throughout the pandemic. There are cultural restrictions about people aren't allowed to do and say really anything anymore. You know, where there's financial restrictions and financial impacts, and it's just, you know, I guess there's two ways you could look at it. It feels like it's just getting ever harder to really follow your own compass when the tools aren't necessarily there to help you do that. On the other hand, there could be an argument that says that, you know, if you need outside tools to follow your compass, then that's not actually being in tune with the true self, right? Like, that's still relying on the outside, and that, you know, the compass is found in the absence of all that is in the outside world. So perhaps there's an argument to be made that all these perceived prescriptions are just kind of, all these perceived restrictions are simply stripping away all of our crutches, and, you know, really revealing what's underneath when you take away all these things and opportunities we've created. And I guess I'm very much struggling with you know, finding inner peace when a lot of that stuff goes away or isn't there. But I suppose if you can master that, then you've really mastered a way to live in this world.
So beautiful, because in a way the inner world and the outer world, they overlap, they are intertwined, and you don't know which one is larger than the other, and how do they interact and how do they impact each other. But the question is, if it's real that we live through conflict and that's our human nature, why do we have to go through these war times? Whether we talk about the war in Europe or the war somewhere else in the world, because there's always been wars everywhere in the world. I mean, I don't think in our modern history we've had one day without war. There's always been a conflict somewhere. There's always been something that didn't go right. For a reason or another, people couldn't just live in peace with each other. They couldn't just enjoy the fruits of this gift of life. So the question is now, why do we have to go through conflict? Where is this coming from? Is it learned? Is it a way of learning to be this way? Is it something that is innately in us and we can't really learn to manage it properly? What's your take on this?
I think that there are probably a lot of different factors, and I'm really approaching this from kind of, you know, like a spiritual perspective, because otherwise a logical perspective doesn't make sense to me. Logically, I can't understand why people are assholes to each other constantly and why they're mean, right? Because it doesn't make sense to me. So I can't look for the answer there. I think the answer is somewhere bigger. I think one of the things that we kind of miss is that there has to be this polarity, because without one you can't have the other. So I think there's kind of an argument to be made that without hate we can't feel love, like we can't feel unconditional love. And I do think though that there is, there's a spectrum and there's an ability to choose what side you want to be on. And I think it's also a little self-defeating to say one side is good and one side is bad. I mean, I know we really want to, right? Like no one wants to condone hatred of any kind. But at the end of the day, we're all choosing an experience. And, how can you experience unconditional love if you've never felt what it's like to have hate? And I mean, I think we really almost all of us have had the feeling of hatred towards a thing or an experience or, people in our lives. And it certainly doesn't make me feel like a good person if those feelings come up. But I think I personally have learned to at least recognize it and try not to repeat things, and really try to seek out the other side of the spectrum as much as I can. But I just, I'm not sure I think we would know how to live without both sides of the equation. I mean, I think we all know people where the second things are going right in their lives, they make some big decision and blow it all up. I mean, we want to be the most interesting person in the movie of our life, right? And if there's no drama, it's not very interesting. So I do think that there's something kind of innate within us that kind of goes searching for conflict, because without conflict, things can feel very boring. And where none of us are okay with boredom. And so on some level, I think that's why both of these things exist. I'm not sure. I wish I had a better answer of how to, only experience love. I think maybe that's the point of children and pets. They're pretty pure.
Well, fair enough. I think it's a beautiful way of exploring this polarized concept, Brooke. I love it. And from my perspective, I don't see there are two different poles. I think it's a continuum of experience that starts somewhere and ends somewhere else. And if you have love and hate towards two different ends, then there's an infinite possibility of experience somewhere in between those two. And at any point in time, every single one of us is actually able to position themselves wherever they want to be. And I think there are times when every single one of us moves towards the negative side of experience, whatever life experience unfolds. And there are times when we move towards the most positive one. And most of the time, probably we float somewhere in the middle. But that's about being human. That's about the journey we take in this life. It's all about knowing and understanding and discovering and changing and transforming and obviously healing, because on the way we get hurt, don't we?
Yeah, I understand. I think why, there's that phrase that hurt people. And I think I kind of wonder if we have the ability to recover sometimes from so much hurt. And I don't think humans are meant to take in the amount of information that we're given in this world. And it just like, we shouldn't know every little thing about what's going on, from our neighbor to what's going on across the world, to just, we know so much, and we see so many terrible things. I really do think it's hard for people to rise up above that, because the little things can't always, they don't feel like it's enough. Like a little good thing in your life doesn't, undo the tragedy of a war somewhere
Yes.
else.
Yes.
But there's also, I think, just a recognition that across the board, even with this huge amount of connection we have with each other, there are so many people who are using it to find ways to bring positive input and joy into the world. And I really think I have to believe that eventually that's going to hit critical mass and start mattering, but that we might still be early enough in this change, this
Yeah.
awakening, I suppose, if you want to call it, that it
Yes.
still feels like nothing's happening, but that it's kind of like compounding interest, right? You're saving money over a long period of time. The first 10 years feel like you're not saving anything at all, and then the next 10 years are really boring, and then finally you start to see the compounding interest and
Yes.
the critical mass. That's kind of how it feels to me on a spiritual human level, but like it's real hard in the early days.
It is, and it's all, I think, if we have to be honest with ourselves, based on all the information that we have, on the knowledge we share these days, throughout the history of humanity, throughout these 2.5 million years of history, I think it's been hard for every single stage and era, hasn't it? I mean, we are probably in the most comfortable existence that humans have had ever, in terms of comfort and quality of life. And we still struggle, so we still complain because we haven't experienced anything worse before, so we really don't know anything else. But I feel that in a way there is an increase in the level of collective consciousness, and more people are opening themselves towards experience, a different kind of exploration, starting from the within, from the self, and then trying to understand the world through this understanding of the self, because the other way around is not actually working, trying to figure out who these people are, how they are, and how they behave, and maybe me copying them, me trying to just fit into that kind of massive, into that kind of group. So there is awakening, but probably you're right, it's not happening at the speed that we need, because every day we have an increase of 200,000 more people on Earth. So every 5 days there is 1 million extra people on Earth. We're going to reach 8 billion very soon, in a few months' time, at the beginning of next year, I think, based on what I remember. I calculated once. So as the new generations are coming to life, then it's very difficult to spread this kind of wave of love and compassion, which is at the core of awakening, which is at the core of humanness. And when you look at what's going on here in Europe, how much distress it brings to all people. I've spoken to people from all countries now. Everyone is scared, everyone is concerned, everyone is thinking, what's my plan B, plan C? Why is this man doing that? Why all of these people follow this man? Why the entire world is watching and doing nothing? I mean, there are so many questions which are reasonable. When you hear people asking these questions, you can't say they are, lost somewhere. They are very sound, they are real, and they make sense. But we don't have answers for this, because it's not in our, it's not in our hands. It's not us doing the action. But we're left with just observing and maybe feeling a little bit the uneasiness, the anxiety, the worry for the future. Where is this world going? What's going to happen to our children, our grandchildren? Is this the beginning to the end? Like some people in the media have started to portray it. I don't watch the news myself, very, very rarely. I indulge into a little bit of news, because my home country, Romania, is very, very involved. It has a border with Ukraine, and there's many refugees flooding our countries, and I have some family there, and they update me on a daily basis with the good and the bad. So this is where we are, and I think it starts with our little contribution. What is that we can each do to make a little bit of a change? But it doesn't seem to be able to, we don't seem to be able to actually change anything from our little corner, rather than donate maybe, or contribute to, with a little bit of empowerment, maybe a little bit of encouragement, maybe a little bit of a prayer. Those that are believers, or they follow a specific creed or faith or whatever. What else can we do? And how fragile are we in the face of those people that actually hold the power and can ignite conflict like that? Any moment that can happen and bring us all on the brink of proper war. Not the war we experience within ourselves, or we experience within our little groups, like families, friendships, sometimes, work environment. We see a lot of conflict everywhere, if we are to be honest, in all relationship circles. But it's an interesting way of looking at life, how disempowered we feel sometimes in the face of war, in the face of conflict, and how we all struggle to respond to challenge and conflict, from this little interaction that we have with someone to the larger scene of the world.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple things really that are really coming up on a bigger scale. One is I've noticed this for, probably, I feel like this started to happen maybe around 2015, 2016 in the US, when, Trump was coming into power. I'm not convinced that anything that's really happened over the past, let's say, 6 to 8 years, past 10 years, let's say, that the things that there's a lot of outrage over, I'm not convinced that any of it is new. From my perspective, it's always been there, but now technology has just caught up to bring it to our awareness.
Yes.
And I don't, again, I think it's just really difficult for us to process this as, physical beings, to take on, historically, we were faced with dealing with the drama within our families or our tribe or our village. And I'm sure plenty of pain was created just based on, drama created in a village many, many generations ago. And now, and just like you said, like, just because, some of our ancestors in the village didn't know about a war happening on the other side of the country, it doesn't mean that it wasn't happening. It's just they didn't know about it. So I think we're just now facing everything that's happening in real time, and that is extremely difficult for us to process. And I think we might get used to it. I think this is kind of evolution happening, that we're going to evolve to be able to handle this amount of information coming at us all the time, especially negative information. But that kind of comes back to just, evolution is slow, and we have eliminated the idea of patience from society and culture. We don't have to wait for anything. We have Amazon Prime in 2 days. We can buy anything with a credit card.
Yeah.
Someone's entire career can be ruined with one tweet. Everything is so fast, and there's usually no nuance, and we can get whatever we want whenever we want it most of the time. And that really has twisted our perspective. So when there's something we want to change, or there's something bad happening, we get very frustrated when it doesn't resolve quickly, when we don't see immediate change. But from an evolutionary perspective, and from the perspective of the age of humanity, things are changing at a lightning pace. I've always been really surprised in a lot of ways. Obviously, as women, we've had historically a lot of struggles, and equal pay and all that stuff. And of course, I've seen so much progress just since I've been working in the world. But my mom, she had 3 choices. She could be a secretary, a teacher, or a nurse. And she couldn't open a credit card in her name in the 70s without her husband. And she's, you know, my mom is still here, and if all goes well, has got many decades left on Earth. And so the fact that like that amount of change that has happened between her experience in her 20s and 30s and mine is radical. And yet it's still not fast enough for us, right? Because we're still experiencing injustice. And so I try and just keep those things in mind when I'm getting upset or frustrated about something. It's just that, you know, the world is not on my timeline, it's on the world's timeline, and so much change really is being made. But I do think it, you know, the job of each individual is to step back and recognize that, and, you know, to try and calm down and find peace within themselves, because it really does seep out to everybody else.
Yeah,
which doesn't help. It doesn't help anything, right?
No.
At the very least, it doesn't make it worse to try and be more peaceful within yourself. On the upside, it actually makes things better. But there, you know, I know people really feel really insignificant, but to work on yourself and, you know, to really embody being the change you wish you see in the world, if nothing else, means you're not creating more hurt.
So beautiful. You moved from the outer circle very close into our own self, our own circle. I think I picked up on a few points. I think I agree with you. The impact on people, considering what's going on in the world, everywhere in the world, the social media, the pressure that is coming with all of this information that is way too much, more than any kind of human brain would be able to process and absorb in such a short, I would say, change of generations. I mean, it's just, we're talking about 2 decades, and it's moving faster than we think. Now, the artificial intelligence is estimated to be obviously sentient in a few years' time, by the end of the decade. And they learn by themselves through deep learning. We know, apparently, we don't hear too many people talking about it. What's going on in there? How are we actually shaped by all of these algorithms and all of these little programs that run behind our screens, behind our mobile phone software systems and everything? And I think you're right. There's a lot of impact. There's a lot of stress that we are not able to manage, most of us. There's a lot of stimulation. We haven't lived enough to get used to all of this amount of knowledge that it's being actually pushed onto us. You know, it's in a way, in a very forceful way, being given to us to digest and process quickly. And if you don't do it, you have that FOMO, you know, you feel like you're missing out on something. So you force yourself again, you know, to just be alert.
Or people make you feel guilty for not being plugged in all the time.
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
as if it's not every, that's one thing that just makes me so crazy, is it's like, we can't all be capable of saving the entire world. Like, the reason why it works is because we have individuals who have passions about certain things. And so you have some people who are, you know, who maybe are really passionate about raising money or helping the Ukrainians as much as they can. And then there are other people who are really passionate about helping Palestinians as much as they can. And just because they're not doing what they do for one group that they do for another doesn't mean their work should be negated, right? Like, we need the actions of everybody to make their little contribution. I mean, the fact that's what's wonderful and beautiful about it, is that we all care about different communities, and therefore, in theory, every community is taken care of. But to expect everybody to mobilize about every single issue every single time is impossible and unfair.
Yeah. It is indeed, because we're dealing with our own worst, in a way, our own conflicts. It's the inner conflict that every single human being has to navigate to their own existential quest. And And then there's all sorts of conflicts around, because even if you are the most peaceful human being and you take care of yourself and you keep yourself in a very calm state, in a very manageable state, then you're interacting with the world. There's always someone that is a little bit on a different kind of frequency around you. And you're, without knowing, within seconds, you're actually at the risk of falling down yourself, of reducing yourself onto that kind of level and reacting from your previous memory, from your from all the knowledge from the database that you have. Because this is how we learn. This is our language. And if this is our language here, that's what we know. I mean, in Russia, it's the same thing. This is what they've been trained to believe and think about the world, about themselves, about the neighboring countries, the neighboring, the people in the neighborhood. That's specific to that culture. I think if you would have taken those people and you would allow them to live and grow up in a different kind of environment, they would be preoccupied by other things, and they would have other kind of dreams and aspirations. But it's absolutely fantastic to see that there is a sense of support and community organized around everything that's going on now. Maybe a bit in the disadvantage of other places in the world where there have been wars, and there are still wars, like Yemen or other places. But anyway, we are where we are. How do we mitigate between what's going on in the outside world, the little conflicts in our little circle, and then what's going on within ourselves? Would you say that, have you found a way of maybe handling conflict, handling war, preventing conflict, preventing war, or maybe, I don't know, going into negotiations from a particular standpoint that bring both partners into a fruit, I would say, into a mutually satisfactory outcome? What's been your experience with conflict and war?
Oh God, I'm terrible with conflict. But I think a lot of people are. It either seems like people are really conflict avoidant, or they just create conflict where they go, and there's no in between. I mean, I know that for me, personal conflicts, that if I can't stop thinking about something, it usually means something needs to be said, and it's not over. And so that, and by that I mean maybe not, I'm talking about for more than a day or so, more than a few hours after the interaction has happened. Like if I'm still chewing on something after a week or two, it probably needs to be said. It's a bit selfish. It's just to, get my own mind calm again, most of the time. But it usually, I don't think I've ever been in a situation where I have really had an issue with someone or something and the other person didn't as well. So I think it almost always needs to be said.
Without guns, without bombing, without anything.
No.
Just by talking, using dialogue.
Yeah, I'm just talking about personal conflict. I'm certainly no expert on global international policy and would never pretend to be, but that's just, issues with friends or partners or that sort of thing. Within myself and conflict, I usually, I will absolutely run myself into the ground thinking about it, but usually once I've done that and I still don't have a solution, the answer is, for me, is usually to wait. It's usually a sign that not all the information is in, and that not making a choice is a choice in itself, and that most situations have the benefit of time. Again, I, like everyone else, have no patience because I expect to get everything with a wave of my phone. And so when I have to wait for more information to come in, that is a special kind of frustration and excruciating pain. But without fail, most of the time, just waiting for more information is the right answer. And very often situations naturally resolve themselves, or the solution becomes available just because you waited.
Yeah. Patience is such an important quality, really. It's such a valuable gift and skill to develop. probably if politicians or those that get themselves into conflicts all the time and fight for their corner, sometimes sacrificing lives, if they would be able to learn this, that would be awesome. But you see, the school is not actually preparing us for life. We don't learn what we need in school. All of these things that we're discussing, they never get tackled in school. It's just so much science, which we don't seem to be using much in life. And then no one is ready to actually start living and, build a life. In a way, we are expected to grow that kind of understanding ourselves through our own mistakes and errors, and through our own pain and suffering, which is a bit unfair. And I've been working around the transgenerational trauma and looking into the consciousness of our parents, because it's been important for me to understand my own life script and my personal history, and to obviously heal my own childhood trauma and to understand my parents. But when I realized that they've been, especially my father, who's a baby boomer, born right in the aftermath of the World War II, from my grandfather, who was actually a war prisoner, a Russian war prisoner now in the territory of Ukraine, where the battles are happening right now. I mean, imagine the distress that those people have been through. My grandfather conceiving my father, and him keeping all that pain and all that hurt in him, and then showing it up, in the world in that kind of abusive and violent and addictive sort of way. So if we give ourselves the chance to actually explore things through a larger perspective, we can actually understand, and it's easier to accept when you understand what happened. And once you accept, it's easier to surrender to what is, not to do nothing about it. Obviously, challenge positively everything that is not, fair, not right, but do it in a way that shows compassion towards everyone involved, towards all of those that are involved in the conflict. Because you rightly said, the conflict is not necessarily happening within one person. It's an interaction between at least two people or groups of people. But in my view, I think the fight is unnecessary, because what we're trying to achieve doesn't exist. It's an illusion anyway. It's all about our fiction, where the border is, what kind of nation are you, if you are this or that, and how would that change you, because you're still a human being living on this earth, a global citizen. So you see, it's all coming through the experience in school, through the failings of our educational systems, and through this kind of happening that we become adults and we have no clue what life is about. And it's then when our journey actually starts, through hardship, through all sorts of challenges, and we find ourselves facing conflicts and not knowing what they are and how to manage them. And I think you're right. Some people move themselves towards the safetiness, although being towards the most conflictual part, I would say you're not necessarily in safety, but it gives you the illusion of actually overtaking the other and feeling empowered. So I think we're talking about the politics, we're talking about what's going on outside in the world, we're talking about what's happening within us. The conflict is part of the human nature. It's part of the nature itself, the outside nature. We see the conflict there as well, when the rain is fighting with the sun and trying to get a little bit of space to manifest. But what is it for us to learn from the war and from the conflict? Do we learn anything, or we just keep repeating the same experiences over and over again? Because if we don't get to learn anything through all of these experiences, then they have been wasted. I think they have been missed opportunities in life. Do you think that for Russia or for Ukraine or for Europe or for the rest of the world, is there a lesson there which we can then extrapolate on an individual level or small collective level?
I'm sure there is a lesson, but I really don't feel qualified as a human to say what it is. I just I mean, I guess the only answer that comes to me is just that, you know, everyone has an individual truth, and so we all have individual lessons when it comes to this stuff. I mean, we're kind of forced to learn just by being in this world. Earth is our school. And so probably everyone's relationship with it is going to be different, but I don't know, looking across the history of time, it doesn't really seem like we ever learn. So I think it just kind of comes down to the individual.
But then the individuals together form a community, and then they are a more powerful force, and they can initiate change. And with us, I mean, from the last war, there's been, I don't know, close to 80 years. There was a sense of somehow peace, although there's been conflicts, many wars. You know, there's been battlefields in many places in the world. But as long as you said, it doesn't affect you, you don't feel like you're part of it. You're just the observer, you know, the participant in it. I think what makes it difficult is that if we don't learn lessons, then we remain stuck in that kind of experience. And I feel that in a way that experience of conflict and war, of lack of tolerance and acceptance and understanding of the other side, makes it very difficult to open to happiness. And if we think that happiness is actually life, if you're not happy, then you're not really alive. You're just, you know, moving yourself through a sort of an existence when you're not, you know, in the awareness of the moment. You're rather stuck into, you know, what happened in the past, or into the worries of a potential future. And it's unlikely that we can actually reach happiness when we go through these stages. And the question is now, how much of the people, how many of the people on earth, how much of the world population is now feeling happiness, able to enjoy happiness, able to retreat within themselves, within their little bubble, and feel at least, I don't know, if not happiness, which is a very subjective concept anyway, everyone would define it in their own way, at least a sense of, if you don't like safety, I'll say maybe stability and calmness and tranquility. It's quite difficult to be happy these days, isn't it? There's so many reasons to be unhappy, so many things that are disturbing. How can you be happy?
Yeah. Well, I think you kind of nail it in the title. It's open to happiness, right? It's not be happy all the time, no matter the circumstance. It's being open to moments. It's, you know, it's being, you know, you can have awareness or compassion for what's going on the other side of the world, or what, you know, something that's going on in your own life, and still be able to stop and recognize the beauty of a flower. That's being open to happiness. That's being open to the moments when they come, knowing that, you know, happiness is not something you're in 100% of the time, ever. That's even, no one does that. Maybe the Buddha could, but even at the end of the day, what the Buddha was doing was staring at a flower and just recognizing the unique beauty in it. And that perspective really can be applied to anything. I mean, if you change your perspective, even just as a thought experiment for a couple, you know, 10 minutes or so, and try thinking to yourself, like, think there's no good or bad choices. Everything is neutral. Every single thing is neutral, right? I mean, from like the perspective of the universe doesn't care at all, right? It's all neutral. Something is either happening or it's not. So if you can look at the world completely from a neutral place, as nothing is good or bad, including most terrible things. And this is a thought experiment, right? I'm certainly not condoning these things, but if nothing is by definition good or bad, then you can see beauty in almost everything. I mean, yes, this what's going on in the Ukraine and the Russian people is terrible and awful, and I think we all wish it hadn't happened. But the sheer amount of generosity and aid and selflessness that's coming from people in bordering countries, and the creative ways people are supporting, those who are suffering the most, is one of the more, it's making me tear up. I think it's one of the more beautiful things I've ever seen.
Mm.
Just the way people are booking Airbnbs in the Ukraine just so the owners can get money. I mean, that's something that wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. We couldn't have done that. And so this kind of comes full circle back to, one of the original things I mentioned, which is just the polarity of these things. So, with these extreme tragedies is also coming this extreme generosity and beauty. I mean, it's the only word I can think about it is beauty. And so I certainly can't separate the two. It's still all connected to, some pretty terrible things. But in the midst of being brought to tears by how terrible this is, I can also be brought to tears by how beautiful some of the things coming out of it are. And that can happen almost in the same moment. And that to me is what it means to be open to happiness, to not, to even in the midst of something terrible, not fight the beauty that comes out of it.
So lovely. I love the way you philosophize. I think you're spot on, because to imagine that people in Ukraine today, even if they are not in the area of conflict, can actually tap on happiness, I think that would be unrealistic, and it would be inhuman in a way. Yeah, maybe people in Russia as well suffer because of different reasons. Obviously, they are dragged into this, and many disapprove what's going on. Other people in Europe, people hooked on the news, that actually see the horrors that are happening there. To imagine them being able to be happy at the same time when they are connected with that reality that is unfolding in front of their eyes, it's impossible. But you're very right. Allowing for moments of openness towards what else is there, to what else is here inside of us, which we can project onto the others as we see it happening, as we see it manifested. The evil, the nastiness that we all hold within ourselves, and the beauty and the generosity and the compassion and love and care, we can all also manifest it, we can all share. It's two facets of the same human being on the same continuum of experience, where the real power, the choice, is stepping in, and it's allowing us to choose how to respond to that. And it's okay to respond with pain when we see horrible things going on, and it's fine to respond with appreciation and gratitude when we see other people responding from their place of kindness and humanness. So we're talking about what it means to be human in these modern times, when the wars are being obviously handled differently than they were in the past, when there was man to man, trying to overtake the other. Now it's a different kind of story altogether. But happiness is impermanent. It's not there to stay. It's not something that we can get and keep. It's about remaining open, as you said, and allowing for moments of beauty, joy, truth, respect, whatever is there that makes sense to us, to come up and just flourish and just blossom in us. And this is how we heal each other, because with one hand we hurt ourselves, and with the other hand we actually caress and heal. That's how it's been forever, if we agree to identify with all of the other humans that are there and not necessarily take the guilt as being made by us, because it's not us individuals acting now, but it's us humans connected into this, being part of the same kind of world and following the same ancestry. So where is this taking us now? We've been talking about what's going on in Ukraine. We've been talking about the war outside, the war on social media now, which is impacting our lives a lot. And it's a war that we might actually lose as the humanity, with the artificial intelligence and everything that is created in labs that we don't even know exist. We're talking about our own inner conflicts and the conflicts we have with the people in our little bubble. It's an interesting chat we're having. How are we gonna end this? Let's see.
I mean, for me, it just comes back to just trying to recognize the moments when, even if you can't recognize happiness or joy or beauty in a set of circumstances, to at least recognize the moments where you feel like you get a little bit of a break, where there's just some respite, and that's starts there.
Mm-hmm. I say the same. I think about reconnecting with ourselves and getting in touch with who we really are, allowing for some space between us and what's happening out there. At the same time, being part of the larger world, but not forgetting that we start somewhere and we end somewhere else. So we are little islands. It's a beautiful way of actually closing this. What are your thoughts for happiness from the perspective of this time that we live in, this modern world?
Well, my little puppy's barking in the background, and
yes,
and she just kind of a very timely reminder. I mean, I just, not everyone's a pet person, but I know that having a dog for me she's kind of my key. She's the way I can move out from whatever feels like too much, too big, or too hard, and to get that break, that mental and physical break. So for me, it's a dog. Maybe for some people it's their kids, or making art, learning something. I think it's just finding those breaks and recognizing it is, what I think it's the best strategy. The best strategy to try and survive it all.
Yeah.
So
please, thank you so much. I think for me, it's about allowing for a little bit of time to process everything, and be kind with ourselves and with the others around, and looking at everything that is going on from a perspective of the observer and the participant at the same time, so we can learn the lessons, so we can stop any kind of trauma that's been passed on to us to go further onto our kids and grandchildren and so on, and the generations that are about to come. It's about openness, getting to know ourselves, getting to do the inner work and heal and grow as people into the people that we want to be, into the people that we want to become. So thank you so much, Brooke. It's been a wonderful chat. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you so much to all of you watching and listening. We are hoping that we brought a little bit of value and we got you thinking. And that's it for now. Until next time, we are wishing you all good health and happiness. Thank you so much, Brooke. Maybe you want to share a little bit, where can people find a little bit more about you as we are ending this?
Yeah, sure. BrookeSiem.com, BrookeSiem.com. Has most of my information, and I'm less and less on social media these days, but I do have some presence there. So at Brooke Siem, BrookeSiem, is where to find me.
Thank you. And you have a newsletter inspiring people around happiness, and you offer some tools as well.
Yes. My newsletter is called Happiness is a Skill, and it really is about learning to have these moments, and learning how to find the beauty even when things are really terrible. And that is the secret, because the more you do it, the more you see it.
Yeah, true. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you to all of you. That's it for now. Until next time, we are wishing you all good health and happiness, and stay open.